Welcome to Connecticut Valley Chronicles. I'm your host, Donald D'Amato. My guest today is Harold Flavin. Mr. Flavin is an expert in sports history. He's also a writer. He's published in the Springfield Journal, something which I'm sure some of you have seen. And he's also a poet. A few years ago, he wrote something called Circle of Fire. Well, today we're not going to talk about the newspaper, and today we're not going to talk about poetry. Today we're going to talk about sports, specifically, or at least in the beginning, about baseball. Baseball in the Connecticut Valley. I guess the first question I would ask you naturally as a beginning question would be, tell us about the origin of baseball in the Valley. Is it old here? Has it been around for a while?
Well, it goes back probably before it was even known as baseball. Mm-hmm. They say that they played rounders here.
What is rounders?
And, well, what distinguished rounders from baseball, both were played on a diamond. Mm-hmm. And if the ball was hit within the confines of the diamond, as today, that was, that was a hit. But in order to throw somebody out, you threw the ball at the runner,
Made it a delightful game.
Oh, yes. Of course, the ball had to be considerably softer than... but when Cartwright set up the rules for the modern game...
Cartwright?
Alexander Cartwright, who is given credit for setting up the modern rules.
Now, that would not be in the Connecticut Valley, would it?
No. He was a manager of the original New York Knickerbockers, who were, along with the Cincinnati Red Stockings, they were the best known,
We're talking original. The 1860s.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Right. And rounders was being played here at that time.
I believe so, yeah.
Now, is it an English game, rounders?
Oh, yeah, yeah. It was mentioned by a Revolutionary War soldier that they were playing at ball, as they called it, during those days, or playing at post, it was also called, because they used posts
instead of bases.
Yeah.
Right. Were there some early teams in the Valley, anywhere in the Valley? Now, by early, I mean the same time period as the Cincinnati Red Stockings.
Even before my time, yes.
I somehow don't think you're quite that old.
Yeah, I think back to the 1850s, pre-Civil War.
Do you remember any names of teams, or do we know much about the teams?
Well, I read newspaper articles about games being played. Spectators brought along chairs, and they watched the game in the corner of, I think it was Lyman and Maine, and that's where the first field was.
And we're talking about roughly what period of time?
1850s.
1850s?
Yeah.
Well, people should know that during that period of time, most of Main Street was open fields, and you had your choice of where you wanted to play a game.
Yeah. And they played amateur games originally, just for the fun of it. And there were some horrendous scores, like 76-24. And games would probably last well into the evening hours, 4 or 5 hours, with scores like that.
I hate to use the term, but were these people who played these games respectable?
I think they were, essentially. These were not professionals.
Okay.
But on the other hand, the first professional team was called the Springfield Mutuals. And I can't guarantee their respectability, but or their competence either, because they lost the game to the fabled Cincinnati Red Stockings, who came to town by something like 76-24 or something like that.
Holy cow.
And
we're talking mid-70s now, mid-1870s.
Yeah. And
any idea why they may have been known as the Mutuals?
I have no idea, unless it was, I don't know if it was connected with the insurance group or not.
With Mass Mutual? We'll have to call them and ask.
Yeah.
I interrupted. You were going to say something about Spalding.
I was going to say that Spalding came to town with the Red Stockings. And evidently he found the area to his liking, because this is where he set up shop, of course, A.G. Spalding.
Did he manage, or did he play, or did he do both with the Red Stockings?
I think he did both.
He did both, yeah.
And Spalding, incidentally, was responsible for the commission, which had Abner Doubleday as the, the founding father,
the founding hero, right?
Yeah,
right.
And
you were telling me before we came on that that's really not accurate, at least in terms of Doubleday being the founder.
No, I think it has something to do with his being a successful Revolutionary War general.
I mean, Civil War.
Civil.
Let's not make him too old either.
Sorry about that. Yeah. And he was a popularizer of the sport too at West Point. But evidently these were his chief connections to the game.
Yeah. Actually, as a historian myself, I think I would probably credit Spalding with making the national sport more than any other figure. And perhaps to that degree, the Connecticut Valley can claim the sport as a valley sport. That may be stretching it a little bit. But,
well, Springfield was a charter member of the first minor league, which was known as the International League.
And there was a team here?
There was a team in Springfield and Hartford and Manchester, and teams from over New York and Pennsylvania. And there was actually a team from London, Ontario. Can you believe the logistics?
Right, it's pretty extensive. What time period are we talking about? 1900?
It may be. I think it was before that. It might have been the 90s. Yeah, or the 80s even.
Do you remember the name of the team that played? Was this the Mutuals again, or?
I don't know the name of the team. No.
See, one of the problems is they change names the way people change socks.
Yeah, and of course Springfield always had that problem with professional teams where people had to pay to attend. You won or you died.
You had to be a winning team or nobody would go. That's true right up into the 20th century.
They had very short patience that extended right to the end.
Was baseball here an ethnic sport? I mean, in terms of being the teams predominantly Irish? Because I know in some cities in the 19th century that was the case.
Yeah.
The teams were heavily Irish, heavily ethnic.
Yes, I would say so. It was somewhat similar to boxing, I would imagine. It was, of course, generally looked down upon for the bourgeois population, I mean, the middle class.
Yeah, frowned upon the game.
Well, these were the rebel, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, I understand that they not only played baseball on the field, but they occasionally had great fights off the field.
Oh, they had marvelous fights, Do you
know of any of that happening around here?
Well, I know that there were great rivalries, even in neighborhoods in those days. And, I mean, it might be well worth your life to play in a high school game, even in Holyoke. My father played for Springfield High, and he graduated in 1917. There was a very bitter rivalry between Holyoke and Springfield.
To the point of an occasional bashing off the field?
Oh, yes.
Goodness.
And semi-pro teams sometimes, were unable to collect their end of the gate. I mean...
I see. In other words, the money which they were supposed to be paid would be withheld.
Withheld, yes.
And how would they get it? By besieging the box office?
Sometimes they were lucky to get out with their life, Run for your life, never mind. Forget the money.
Would you say that baseball was always popular here, even with all the problems?
Yes. It was a national sport.
Very early.
And they first had excellent teams. The manager, I believe, of the Hotel Kimball during the 1890s first really got together a good group of ball players, you know.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at some pictures. You brought in some pictures, and
yes.
I forgot to have them shown. So let's take a look at them.
Right.
Tell us what they're all about.
This is Vic Rashi, who was a graduate of Tech High, I believe in 1939.
Uh-huh.
And right from the beginning, Vic had that high, hard one. I've been writing articles for the Springfield Journal, as you mentioned, and I wrote one about a man named Herbie Hollister, who pitched for Bosch, the AAA Industrial League.
A good team at one time.
Yes,
yeah.
And Vic was the opposing pitcher. Herbie was a pretty good hitter, but the first time he stood in against Vic, he said the ball came whistling in under his chin, and he was low bridge, so Herbie had to hit the deck. And as he was going down, he thought, my God, I've got to hit the first ball this guy throws or I'm going to get killed, you know. And so luckily, Vic didn't, he just had a sort of a wrinkle for a curveball at the time. And so luckily he got the wrinkle and Herbie got a base hit. But he just didn't want to stand in there against Vic. I mean,
he wasn't called the Springfield Rifle for nothing. That was a reference to the speed of the fastball.
Oh, he could throw it. Yeah.
Now Rashi played basically for the New York Yankees.
Yeah, well, most of his career.
Right, right. But a relatively short career as a pitcher?
I wouldn't say so. Of course, the Yankees set a record which will probably never be broken. They won 5 World Series in a row. And Vic appeared in 6 World Series altogether. And I believe he won 5 or 6 games.
Yeah, at least 5 games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he did play here, of course, amateur for Tech. I went to Classical. I got out in 1940. And Vic got out in 1939. But there was a classic pitching duel between Vic and a guy named Jim Wilson, who pitched for Classical. And the astounding, well, Vic pitched a no-hitter, but they only got 4 hits off of Wilson. And the amazing thing about the game was that both of these guys ended up in the big leagues, and between them both, they won over 200 games.
And Wilson went to the big leagues
Jim
also?
Wilson went up to the Red Sox. He got a fractured skull with the Red Sox, but he did come back and he won something like 82, 83 games for the, I don't know if they were called the Boston Braves or the Milwaukee Braves, but he ended up with the White Sox. He won over 80 games, and it was really amazing. These 2 guys pitching high school, you know?
And out of Springfield.
Out of Springfield.
Of course, Rashi was born in West Springfield, so
but he grew up in the South End. I hasten to add.
Right. Well, we have to give West Springfield a little bit of credit.
Yeah.
A little bit of credit.
Yeah.
Could we see some of the other pictures, please? Who are we looking at here?
Is this, I can't see the pictures, frankly. I'm not sure if it's Rashi and, is it Rashi and somebody else?
Early DeRocher.
Early DeRocher.
Early
Babe
DeRocher.
Ruth? Was it
with,
Babe Ruth?
With Babe Ruth on the right-hand side. Now, that is a very early picture.
Yeah. Well, DeRocher, of course, was also from West Springfield. And he went up originally to the Yankees. And DeRocher had a somewhat unsavory reputation.
You had a number of anecdotal stories that you told me off camera. You think you could clean up a couple of them and pass them along to
this
folks?
particular one is quite well known.
Okay.
I hope none of DeRocher's relatives are looking at it. But I think this has been mentioned in books about DeRocher.
Okay, good.
But he first went up with the Yankees, and this picture evidently is with Babe Ruth. There's an anecdote. How true it is, I don't know. But that DeRocher had stolen a watch from Babe Ruth's locker. And so he was summarily discharged from the Yankees. And how true it is, I don't know. But, you know, this picture evidently was before the
Pre-watch.
Pre-watch.
But you had some other stories also.
Yeah, well, I mentioned that my father played ball, and he brought up an incident. Of course, DeRozier was from West Springfield.
Uh-huh.
My father lived in the North End, and at the time they used to have crop games in this barn in the North End, you know, like Saturday night.
Nobody out there knows what you're talking about, but go ahead.
You know, crop games, dice, goes back to the Romans, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, they used to have big games in this barn. I think it was Blanchard's barn or something like that. And one night, they caught Leo switching the dice. And evidently, he was lucky to get away with his life again, because they chased him all the way across the North End Bridge. You know, fortunately for baseball, you know,
he survived.
They didn't catch him.
Of course, he's rated as one of the greatest managers ever in the game.
Yeah.
No question
and he was
about
a
it.
great fielding shortstop with the Cardinals. He played with the original Gas House gang, of course.
Of course, we're talking about here a long span of time, because DeRozier right now is at least 85.
Absolutely.
So I would assume that he's
still living and in good health, I believe.
I think he's down south somewhere.
I really don't know.
Yeah. He started. Let's see. We have another picture here. Let's take a look at this one. What do we got? Mr. DeRozier again with Casey Stengel.
With Stengel, huh?
Yeah. Now this must be a World Series shot.
Yeah. When DeRozier was managing Brooklyn, and Stengel was managing probably one of those 6 World Series I was talking about. But that was a great rivalry. Brooklyn, of course, never did beat the Yankees till I think it was 1956.
Yeah, something.
They finally won a series. You know.
Where would DeRozier have developed the skill to be so great a manager?
Well, he, you know, like Rashi, he played around here. He played, I believe, high school ball in
West Springfield High School.
Yeah, and he played semi-pro ball. Yeah. And
did he ever go through into the minors? Was he called up out of this area by the Yankees?
Well, absolutely. He went to the minors first. But as I mentioned before, he was a sort of a protege of Robert Moranville, who was also
we have some pictures of.
Who was also from West Springfield. In fact, let me see. DeRozier's father had been a railroad engineer, and apparently he was disabled, but he was a good friend of Moranville's. And he mentioned that his boy was, you know, an up-and-coming shortstop. They were both shortstops.
That's interesting, too, because Rashi also played for a railroad team.
He played for the New York, New Haven, and Hartford, which had one of the better semi-pro clubs in 39, 40, and around that, you know, just before World War II. And just before he attended William and Mary. I think he got a degree from William and Mary. Rashi did.
I think Rashi is one of the first of the big league players to actually get a college diploma.
I can believe it.
Extremely rare for that period of time.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Moranville. I think we have some pictures of Mr. Moranville, and we can talk about him also.
Yeah. Well, of course, Moranville was known to all and sundry as Rabbit. And
now, he's in this group picture, folks. We know he's in here.
He has his mouth open, and he's probably talking.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
Whether it was profane or not, what he said, I don't know. But
was he especially profane? I mean, these men we're talking about here, except perhaps for Rashi, are real characters.
They weren't necessarily gentlemen. I mean. And,
well, that makes them interesting for a show like this.
Of course, in those days, were known as pool room habitués.
Oh, yes.
They were even known to take a drink occasionally.
Yeah, I don't think DeRocher ever lost that reputation.
Yes, and
but Moranville really belongs almost to another era.
Yes,
he's almost been completely forgotten.
Yeah. Well, it's a shame because when I was growing up, of course, he was the first big league game I saw was in 1933, and Rabbit was just coming to the end of his time.
Mm-hmm.
He finished up, I think, in 35.
Mm-hmm.
But he was universally known for his vest pocket catch. These towering, big league pops. He'd catch down around his belt.
Like a breadbasket type?
Yeah, and it was very colorful to see. But
he also doing this with the simpler glove of the time period,
oh,
the
yes.
smaller glove.
I was going to mention that he was a friend of DeRocher's father,
Mm-hmm.
so he bought DeRocher a glove. But the first thing he did was to cut out the palm of the glove. And DeRocher said it took a while to get used to it, but not as long as you would expect.
To actually catch the ball.
I mean, you would catch the ball in the palm of your hand.
Barehanded, essentially.
Yeah.
Now, why was that? Why do something like that?
Well, of course, in the 19th century, a glove was considered pretty effete. I mean,
people actually went out there bare knuckle.
This wasn't really done. It was, like wearing a helmet in hockey.
Mm-hmm. Or in baseball today.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
now, was the ball as hard as it is today?
Real men didn't wear gloves.
And they don't have quiche either. Was the ball as hard?
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
Catching it barehand? What about a line drive or something?
When originally there were no gloves,
Mm-hmm.
You see 19th century pictures of teams. They had bats and balls, no gloves. No masks for catchers.
Mm-hmm.
None of the tools of ignorance. Catchers stood considerably behind the bat.
8-9 feet behind the plate, catch the ball on the bounce.
Yeah, sometimes
that's absolutely amazing. The number of broken fingers and broken wrists and even a broken palm of the hand, if that sounds like it's possible.
Yeah. Well, catchers, of course, used to have fingers that looked like spaghetti.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was going to say that Moranville was in the first big league game I saw in 1933 against the Giants, the New York Giants.
Who did he play for?
He played for the Boston Braves.
Okay.
And he was
some folks out there don't know who the Boston Braves were.
Oh, what a shame.
Isn't that terrible?
Yeah. They moved out, I believe, in the 50s. Moved out to Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Moranville went to the minor league team in New Bedford.
Mm-hmm.
And Moranville's father was a patrolman in the Springfield Police Department. And on his beat was a hotel, I don't know if it was on Worthington Street, where the Springfield team and the All-Connecticut League stayed.
Mm-hmm.
And Moranville's father wasn't enchanted by the fact that his boy was going to become a ball player.
He's playing with thugs.
Of course. I mean, but anyway, he did. He went to New Bedford, and this is where he got the nickname. It was said that
was going to be my next question. But go ahead. You've just taken my question away from me.
It was said that he acquired this nickname from a little girl who watched him in a pepper game, jumping around, and she said he looks just like a jackrabbit.
He was so good on his feet.
Yeah.
But I've also heard another story.
Oh, about the rabbit?
In reference to that.
Oh, yes, yeah.
The size
he was
of his...
sort of an elfin-looking guy. He was only 5'5", 155 pounds, and yet his durability was amazing. He lasted something like 24 years.
Incredible career.
Yeah.
Incredible career.
And he ended up, I think his last connection with baseball was coaching the Springfield team in the Eastern League.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now that Springfield team would have been the...
That would have been, what, 1941.
Okay, but the Springfield Giants? Would there have been a Giant connection at that time?
It was either the Nats or the Cubs.
Okay, right. Probably the Cubs.
They went through constant...
change of ownership.
Changes,
But of course, this would have been at Pinchin Park, because I think Pinchin Park dates back to the 30s.
When,
construction.
Okay, and even the park was known originally, I believe, as League Park. That might not have been the original name, but during the 30s it was a League Park. And I think they changed the name during the 40s. It might have been the bicentennial, 1936?
Let's see, 1636, tricentennial.
It might have been in honor of, William Pension. Yeah, the name change.
That was only built, I think, in 32 or 33. Although I'm sure I'll get 19 telephone calls telling me that the date's wrong. Yeah.
Oh no,
that's earlier than that.
That goes
into
back.
the teens.
Yeah.
That far back.
Yeah.
Okay.
There have been professional teams here, real good ones, since at least the 90s.
What do you think the prospects, now that we've gone through the history of baseball and some local characters in baseball, what do you think the prospects are for another professional team here?
I don't know, really. Of course, it's in the lap of the politicians, right? And it's also dependent on where are they going to put the ballpark.
Sure.
I mean, there have been discussions down through the years of possibly out in the Blunt Park area, but now that's, of course, been usurped.
And Walker Stadium in Forest Park is something they've been talking about since the 1940s, even when Pinchin Park was there.
Yeah.
They talked about that.
It's, where will they put it? That's the question. Even if they come to an agreement and come up with a scratch.
Are you going to be working on a book about Connecticut Valley sports, about baseball in the Valley?
Well, I think I'll continue to write articles, and so far I haven't been approached to any major publishers.
It's a fascinating subject, and what's amazing about it is the number of major figures, major national figures who are out of the Valley and out of West Springfield. I mean, here you have two major national figures. Actually, all three of them are West Springfield.
All three of them West Springfield,
Must be something in the water or in the air or something. I don't know. Have any of them ever come back? Other than Moranville came back to manage?
I don't know. I know Angelo Bertelli comes back, another West Springfield. It's amazing, isn't it? And Angelo played baseball in the AAA Industrial League. He was a catcher.
We have run out of time. I'd love to carry this on. Mr. Flavin, thank you very much for coming here and talking about baseball. And thank you for being our audience on Connecticut Valley Chronicles.
Oh, my pleasure.